I love that you bring in a lot of social justice and human rights issues as you're talking about forgiveness, because this relates to
Yeah.
culture. Um, so, um, can you talk a little bit about like what does forgiveness look like for marginalized people who have been
Yeah.
oppressed by systems
Yeah.
like criminal justice, like
Yeah.
racism, colonialism? How do they um, how do they navigate through these
Yeah.
systems of oppression and have a mindset of forgiveness?
Yeah. This is one of the things I think is really important, because one of the places where you see, and I think they're not wrong to make this critique, but one of the places you see a critique of forgiveness is within like contemporary activist movements. This is not true of everyone across activist movements, but some in the Black Lives Matter movement say like, forgiveness is, we're not ready to not be angry. We're not ready to reconcile with folks, so we don't want the language of forgiveness. And I think they're absolutely right to say those things, right? What I
Hmm.
want to say is, and I draw upon like the teachings of Black theologians and other Black Christians to think about this, is what I want to say is like, no, actually marching through the streets, expressing your anger and not retaliating, to me, that should count as forgiveness, right? Like after George
Mm-hmm.
Floyd, when I saw people in the streets marching,
Yeah.
incredibly angry, voicing their frustration, saying there cannot be reconciliation until there is some kind of atonement, but not
Yeah.
going out and and doing to police officers what had been done to them, not returning life for life, like for like. Like to me, like that's non-retaliatory. That's a non-retaliatory response to injustice, which is
Yes.
calling us towards justice. What I want to say is like we Christians should look at that and say, look at how forgiving they're being, because they are
Mm.
not responding to these acts of violence with retaliatory acts of violence. Rather, they are coming out peacefully and articulating their anger clearly, and
Mm.
demanding there be some atonement. But they're not saying like, unless there's atonement, we're going to start a war. They're saying we deserve better. We deserve better. Black Lives Matter. To me, that is what I think forgiveness looks like, because it's not retaliatory. It
Mm.
is angry. It's not ready to reconcile, but it's also not doing what has been done to them. Right? It's not responding like for like. But yeah, and so to me, like, I, so I accept the critiques of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, another one of the moments where I really thought about this was after the Charleston shooting in 2015, when Dylan Roof was arraigned. Um, some of the family members, victims, survivors of victims of the Charleston shooting, some families, some family members within some families, not all, some offered forgiveness to Dylan Roof. And what's really interesting is the white media, the national media, kind of took that message and pasted up very obviously. Oh, the families forgave. The families forgave. The narrative became about forgiveness, and what you didn't see quoted as much was the rest of those families' comments, where people said, "I forgive you, but I am angry, and I will always be angry." Right? I forgive you, but you can
Right.
never give me back what you took from me. I forgive you, but I want nothing to do with you. I hope you disappear from my
Yeah.
life forever, because we need to move on, and you can't be part of our lives. Like, that part of their forgiveness was kind of not part of the larger narrative, right? But to me, it's really crucial to the way they were describing and understanding their own forgiveness, which was like, I'm not over being angry. I'm not trying to reconcile with you, Dylan Roof, who shows no sense of any kind of responsibility or remorse. Like, when they were saying "I forgive you," they were not saying everything's okay, let's move on. They were saying, and in fact, there were some people who were from the forgiving families who wrote op-eds afterwards who were saying, "No, we cannot move on. You didn't hear what we were saying. We were saying we cannot move on. Lament with us, cry out with us, mourn with us."
Mm.
Right? And the most important thing we do now is mourn and lament and figure out how to move past this. But all they were saying is, we are not going to try to kill you the way you kill the people who we love. But
Mm.
again, like, I feel like that is a significant moral task, because I'm sure for many of the folks who said "I forgive you," they were feeling rage, and they were feeling murderous rage, and it would be understandable if they were feeling murderous rage.
Absolutely.
But and so this is what I mean. I feel like we have models of this already throughout our
Mm.
culture, and especially among marginalized groups who respond um, in non-retaliatory ways to deep and grave crimes and injustices, sins. we just tend not to call it forgiveness. And I want to say like these are significant moral acts that deserve the kind of weight and of Christian theological ethics to come to them and say like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. This is actually the kind of behavior we're talking about.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Delgado Podcast. As always, you can get the show notes, video links, and resources mentioned in this episode on my blog at mikedelgado.org. You can also get updates to new shows and get access to the full archive of past shows by following the Delgado Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you ever have suggestions for future topics or guests you want to hear from on this show, please reach out. My email is delgado@ucla.edu. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll chat more next time.